Welcome to the 5-Star Zone. I'm your host, Rico Beard, and what a wild night it was Tuesday night in the Big Ten. You had one team that showed utter dominance on the road. You had another team bounce back at home, and you had two upset losses on the road for two teams that, look, they're going to make the tournament, but man, you may have given hope to another Big Ten team in Ohio State who desperately needed a win. So let's start off with the team that's not only the best team in the Big Ten, but maybe the best team in the nation. That is the Michigan Wolverines. Look, you know the storyline. Yaxel Lindenborg had the video where he talks about, well, you know what, they're going into Mackey and they're going to whoop ass and, you know, F Purdue. And he talked the talk. And then he came out and Dusty May, his coach, said, hey, it was done months ago. And, you know, he's learned from this and he's learned not to say that thing. And he said, hey, Yaxel was very apologetic, said, this isn't how I talk. Actually, Yaxel, it is how you talk. You said it rather easily, but you talk the talk and then you walk the walk. You went out there and you got the job done. And Michigan goes into Mackey and beats the Purdue Boilermakers in a place where nobody really walks into Mackey. They did 91-80. Game was never close. Purdue tried to get it to under 10, and Michigan would just keep coming back and keep scoring. And every time it looked like Purdue would get back into the game, Elliot Godot just would come up with a driving layup or a big shot and just end their hopes and dreams. It was a lot of people there. The crowd was ready. The crowd was ready to make Yaxel and the Michigan Wolverines take that L, but Michigan wasn't going to do that. And the thing about this Wolverine team, here's what makes them so dangerous. Look, after the game, Matt Painter said they have 4 losses. And he was like, I don't think Michigan may end up with 4 losses this entire season. And here's why those may be prophetic. That may be a prophetic statement from Matt Painter. Here's the deal. Michigan has balanced scoring. So even if you say, okay, we're going to shut off Yaxel, okay, now you got Elliot Godot. Now you got Mara. Now you got Mo Johnson. Now you got people coming off the bench and LJ Kasai. Like, there's scoring coming from all around. And when you looked at the beginning of that game, Michigan finished with, they were 13 for 23 from the three-point line. Guys, that's 56%. You're not losing any games where you're 13 from 20. When you're shooting 56% from the field. But the thing was, it wasn't like one person was hot. A bunch of people had 1 3-pointer. So what Michigan would do is they get the offensive rebound. Mara would kick it out to an open guy, whether it was Kason, whether it was Barnett. And he was just finding guys, and guys were hitting the open shots. And when everybody is contributing the way the Michigan Wolverines are contributing, man, they're a hard out. Now, they're going to have a big test against the Duke Blue Devils. It's number 1 versus number 3. I got a feeling that whoever wins that game is in the pole position to be the number 1 overall seed for the NCAA tournament. And not that you need to be the number 1 overall seed, but I think it would help. But when you look at this Michigan team, yeah, the Duke team may pose a threat to them, but it's non-conference. So even if you lose that game, doesn't matter. You haven't lost a spot in the Big Ten Conference. But going into that game, I think it's going to be a coin flip game. I've seen both teams play up close and personal. Duke with the Boozer brothers, Boozer twins, they play great defense. Michigan has the big front court. And as I said before, Michigan, just the way that they could play, and you can't just shut down one person and beat this team. Now, I do think as far as the Wolverines goes in the tournament and for a deep run, they go as far as Elliot Godot takes them. I mean, Yaxel, he's the guy. You see the front court, but it's Godot. When Godot has games where he turns the ball over a lot, bad turnovers off his foot, just missing guys, that's when Michigan struggles. So long as he's playing his A game, you're not stopping this Wolverine team. It's when Elliot Godot suffers and has, high turnover games, that's when the threat comes in to beat them. And also, I mean, I don't know who lit their hair on fire, and maybe they were just trying to back up their teammate. But shooting 56% from the three-point line is not something that Michigan does. You go to any place and you shoot 56% from the three-point line, you're going to win that game. So I don't know if they can continue that, but what I do know is they can continue the balanced scoring that is the Wolverine team. And Dusty May knows that he has something special here, as he came out after the game and said, look, it's nice that we're number one now, but I need to be number one April 7th when we're cutting down the nets. That's when you know. And this team has the potential to become an iconic team. I talked about it on the radio, and a lot of people took it the wrong way. Look, you look at the Duke team last year, and they had a bunch of guys who ended up going in the first round of the draft. They had a couple lottery picks. And that Duke team last year looked like it was going to be one of the Duke teams of all Duke teams to win the national title. They made the Final Four. They did not win the national title. And we don't talk about them anymore. We don't talk about that team. And I think that's for this Michigan team. If you want to get up there with the unibrow Wildcats, if you want to get up there with the, some North Carolina teams, you want to get up there with the 24 UConn teams, you want to get up there for your old school guys with the UNLV Running Rebels, win the national title. And now you put this Wolverine team in that category, because they're not just beating you. They're beating people by double digits. In some games, they're beating people by 20 or more points, going on fanatical runs that you're just like, wow, where'd this come from? I think it was, I want to say they had like a 42-17 run. I mean, the way they jump started the game, Purdue is down by 20 points at the, immediate timeout. It's like Purdue was just out of this thing. I think it was like 40-20 or 42-22. And it's like, Purdue? Really? Mackey? Wow, you're getting your ass kicked in Mackey. You don't see that out often. That's why I think this Wolverine team is special. Only thing that can hurt them is injuries and bad play by the point guard from Elliot Cadeau. And even when he was bad, okay, fine. They brought in LJ Kason off the bench, and he brought this team back. Like, they're never out of the game. And when they go on a run, it's not like a 10-0 run. They go on runs where they're scoring 30 or more points in those runs, and they're suffocating you, and they're putting teams away. So Michigan, big game coming up against Duke. We'll see how they keep responding, because they just keep every test that's in front of them. They keep passing, and they keep passing with flying colors. It was, okay, well, we'll see what happens when you play Nebraska and Michigan State in that same week. They handled that week. They won both games. Now it's like, okay, what's happened when you go to Mackey and you got to play Duke on a neutral site? They've already knocked off one. Duke is next on a neutral site in D.C. The way this team is looking, unless something catastrophic happens to this team injury-wise, this looks to be a team that, you can go ahead and pencil to go far in the NCAA tournament. And depending on how far they go, they're borderline being one of those teams that will be talked about for a long, long time. All right, let's head over to the other team in the state of Michigan. Michigan State had the bounce-back victory after the loss they had at Wisconsin. Michigan State gets UCLA at home. They defeat them 82-59, and in a game where, talk about runs, Michigan State held UCLA scoreless for, I think, about 9.5 minutes, where UCLA was stuck on 12 points. Michigan State goes on an 18-0 run. But I think for the beauty of the Spartans, they saw something that they haven't seen happen in a long time. They saw the ball go through the basket, especially three-point shots. Michigan State finishes shooting a little over 50%, 14 for 27 from the three, making 14 shots, whether it was, Jackson Kohler got involved early and scored 7 early points. And, I talked about Michigan and Ellie Godot. Michigan State will go as far as Jackson Kohler takes them. In the games where Michigan State has struggled as of late, Jackson Kohler has been non-existent in the first half. And it's gotten to the point now where it's not, I don't think it was a slump. It's more of a lack of confidence, where the kid just doesn't want to shoot the ball. Against UCLA, you saw a little bit of the swagger. You saw him wanting to get the ball. Now, he still is struggling against the double teams. Either you make a quick move and spin to the basket, or you kick it out to an open man, but he's still getting caught up in those double teams like UCLA threw at him, and he ends up turning the ball over. If Jackson Kohler gets his stuff together, I think this Michigan State team is poised to take a deep run in the tournament. Now, I don't think they'll have a run like Michigan, because I think Michigan can cut their own grass. Michigan State will need a little bit of help in the tournament. By a little bit of help, I mean they're going to need one of the top teams to get knocked off. look, they played Duke already, and look, it was the game where Jeremy Fears played his worst game of his career at MSU. He was 0 for 10. Think about it. Jeremy Fears hits 2 baskets in that Duke game. They upset the Blue Devils. They can hang with teams, but you're going to need contribution similar to what Michigan has from everybody, and they got that in that game against UCLA. When you look at what happened, I mean, it was, let's just break down the scoring. Jordan Scott, he's been a godsend coming off the bench. Reminds me a lot when Jace came off the bench last year. He's become that spark, whether it's offensively, whether it was defensively. Yesterday, he gets 11 points. He's 3 for 3 from the 3-point line, hitting some wide open shots. Jackson Kohler has 7 early points, ended up scoring 9. He had 10 rebounds. They still need to get him more into the flow of the offense. They just need to get that kid's confidence back up, because when you look at him, he just looks like a guy where it's shattered. It's not a slump. He just has lack of confidence. I don't know what's going on with that young man, but Tom Izzo has about a little over a month and a half to figure it out, because if you can get him back to playing how he was at the beginning of the year, Michigan State's a dangerous team. That's a team that knocked off Kentucky. That's a team that knocked off Arkansas. But when he is struggling the way he is, that's the team that lost to Wisconsin. That's the team that lost to Minnesota. That's the team that should have lost to Rutgers. Michigan State goes as far as Jackson Kohler takes them. But going back to them, Cohen Carr, 16 points. He's getting that little elbow jumper. He was going through a slump. He's starting to get confidence in his shot. He's shooting the 3. He never stopped shooting the 3. He's making them. But it's that little elbow jumper that he's adding to his repertoire, that it's not just all about dunks and 3s. He's starting to get some shots as well. Jeremy Fears, 16 points, 10 assists. He's become the scoring leader of this team. And I don't see another 0 for 10 game out of Fears. I think he's gotten the stupidity out of his system, and you're now seeing a man who's going out there. He's dialed in, he's focused, and I think he's going to really help his team out. You got Kurt Tang coming off the bench, even Trey Fort. Like, those guys came in there and they all contribute. Carson Cooper with 12 points and 7 rebounds. Now, a funny thing happened in that game. Late in the game, if you watched it, Stephen Jemerson II gives a hard foul to Carson Cooper. Carson Cooper took offense to that. Carson Cooper gets up. He wants to fight. It was a breakaway. And the referees they look at it, and they call it a flagrant 1, where 2 shots. They also gave, I think, technicals to both players. 2 shots in the ball for Michigan State. But that's not the story that happened. The bigger story was, for the first time ever, I don't think I've ever seen this before. Well, Stephen Jamerson got tossed out the game by his coach, Mick Cronin. Mick Cronin told him to get off the court, pointed to the locker room, and made Stephen have the walk of shame. It felt like Cersei Lannister going in Game of Thrones. The only thing missing was a woman behind him with a lantern going, shame, shame, shame. That's what happened in that game. And there's a little bit of a backstory. I guess that game was personal for Stephen. He was an MSU student. He wanted to try out as a walk-on. He couldn't make it. He wanted to be a student manager. He couldn't make it, so he moves on with his career. So that game was personal for him, and I don't know if that was the extra oomph late in the game. But Cronin said, hey, look, you're down by 27. You got to play smarter. He was a defenseless player. That's not the type of guy and not the type of team that he wants to see. And he kicked him out the game. He ejected his own player. And then you all saw the video afterwards where he's talking about, he basically doesn't give a rat's ass about the Michigan State crowd and the zone. Because they were chanting for Devin Booker, who, by the way, Devin Booker, not a great homecoming, coming back to Michigan State. 2 points, 2 rebounds. I don't think that UCLA has gotten their money's worth out of that young man, but he came back and the crowd chanted his name. The crowd wanted him in there. He shook everybody's hand. He even stayed after the game and gave a hug and handshake to all the student managers before an assistant coach for UCLA came and got him and said, hey, buddy, we got to go and, come back with your team. You don't play here anymore. But yeah, it was just very weird to see that interaction of Cronin kicking his own player off the court. Now, look, I don't know. Look, he's been complaining and whining a lot in the media. Not going to sit well when, you're trying to sell people on staying with your team. It's not going to sit well when you're trying to tell people why they want to come and play with you when they see you kind of embarrass your guy. Look, he stood up for what he thought was right. I would have just sat him on the bench. I don't think you needed to have him do the walk of shame. That was just one where maybe cooler heads prevail. That's one where maybe the assistant coaches say, hey, you know what? We don't need to do that. We can just sit him at the end of the bench and he won't go back into the game, and you handle it in the locker room. I'm always a big fan. Don't air your dirty laundry in front of people, especially on the road. But, Michigan State gets the bounce back victory that they so desperately needed. They've fallen from the 3 line of the NCAA tournament, a lot of the bracketologies, to the 4 line now. And I guess the key is you want to get back into that 3 line or maybe even the 2 line so that you set yourself up for a better chance at making it to the Sweet 16 weekend. Because right now you stay on the 4 line, you're looking at a 5 seed, and that's that 4-5 game right off the rip. That's when you're going to end up playing a team like a St. John's, which, trust me, I can just see it right now, Izzo versus Patino. That drama is just ready to be made. So for MSU, you got to keep this thing going. You have Ohio State coming up this Sunday. Now, speaking of Ohio State shorthandedly, they were shorthanded, and it didn't matter. Ohio State did to Wisconsin what Wisconsin does to everybody else. Wisconsin struggled. Ohio State wins they win 86-69. Bruce Thornton, 27 points. He becomes the 3rd leading scorer for Ohio State. And Devin Royals, 25 points for a shorthanded Buckeye team. Wisconsin, you saw what they did against Michigan State. You saw what Wisconsin has done against the top teams, whether it was Michigan, whether it was Nebraska, was MSU. They rained down threes. They had some of the best wins in the Big Ten. But in this game, Wisconsin showed me when the threes aren't falling, Wisconsin doesn't win games. Wisconsin, 7 for 26. Yeah, you heard me right. They shot 26% from the 3, and that game was over early. The Buckeyes, shorthanded, just devastated the Wisconsin Badgers. Coming off of that great win, they were ranked 24th, and I got a feeling they won't be ranked come next week because they took it on the chin. The Buckeyes desperately needed that win because the Buckeyes right now are a bubble team. So the Buckeyes will take that win against Wisconsin and now try to galvanize that team and come into East Lansing, and knowing that if they could beat the Spartans and Buckeyes in the same week, that will catapult them off the bubble, off the play-in games, and squarely into the tournament as a 11 or 10 seed. But that means that they don't have to play in Dayton, or they're not on the bubble and doing bubble watch. So this game's Sunday against the Spartans at the Breslin Center. It's going to be a very important game for the Buckeyes, and for Michigan State. You want to keep the good vibes going as well. You want to try to get a better spot where you're at, because right now, like I said, you're sitting on that 4 line. You're trying to make it back up to the 3 line. So knocking off the Buckeyes is going to be a big thing for the Spartans. We'll see what happens. This is going to be a game. It's a 1:00 game on a Sunday. It's going to be a good watch. But yeah, the Buckeyes got a much needed victory, a tournament resume type of victory over the Wisconsin Badgers. Now they just need Wisconsin to come and start winning again so that can become a quad 1, because Wisconsin is right on the cusp of quad 1 and quad 2. Right now, as of today, they're a quad 2, but they're so close to quad 1. If they win some more games, that'll be a good for the Buckeye team. The other big game happening in the Big Ten, told you it was a busy night, Tuesday night in the Big Ten. It was Iowa and Nebraska. And Nebraska, man, they've now lost, 4 of their last 6. Nebraska loses to Iowa at Iowa 57-52, and what was a battle of it was a slugfest. It was defense, and it was not great shooting, as Nebraska only made 5 3-pointers the entire game. They were 5 for 24. Yeah, 5 for 24. And Iowa, I don't think was that much better. Iowa was only 6 for 23. What it was Bennett Sturtz, 25 points in that game. He led all scorers in that game. For Nebraska, they just couldn't get their big dogs to be their big dogs. For Nebraska, Sandefurt, 13 points. Mast, 8 points. You're looking at Hoiberg, the point guard, 4 points. They just couldn't get things going. It was a game where Iowa just kind of kept them at arm's length. Iowa kept them at about 5 points the entire time, and they never could get over that hump. And Iowa comes away with an impressive victory, knocking off Nebraska again. Like I said, Nebraska hitting a little bit of a slump right now where they look like they were going to be the favorites. But maybe because, look, they're not going to play any of the big boys of the season for the rest of the year. But I didn't think that they would walk into Carver Hawkeye and lose this game. But Iowa had other thoughts in mind. And Iowa made sure that, hey, look, we are – they were out there playing for themselves, and Iowa's still trying to get one of those bubble. They're a bubble team as well. They're trying to get into the NCAA tournament. They're now sitting at 19-7 after that victory. But yeah, the Big Ten trying to get as many teams as possible. And oh, by the way, found out too, UCLA is also a bubble team. So even though they got destroyed for the past couple games, University of Michigan and Michigan State, UCLA and Mick Cronin, they still have their eyes set. Their last I looked, bracketology and Joe Lunardi had them on the bubble, a play-in game, along with the Ohio State Buckeyes. So season is not over for those teams, but we'll have to see what happens. As far as Wisconsin, look, I talked about Michigan goes as far as Godot takes them. Michigan State goes as far as Jackson Kohler and getting his confidence back. Wisconsin, they make their threes, they can beat anybody. They can't make their threes, they get run out the gym. They're feast or famine, that team. And quickly in the game, if they're not making their threes, it looks a lot like the game they had against Ohio State. When they're making their threes, it looks a lot like the game they had against Michigan. It looks a lot like the game they had against Michigan State. So that's what you're looking at for those teams. But as far as the Big Ten, I think all eyes are looking towards Saturday's game, Michigan and Duke on a neutral court. That's going to be the fun game. That's going to be the game that I think everybody wants to see, because that's going to be the one that I think is going to really tell you who's going to be that number one overall seed. Look, Houston's already lost. Arizona's hit a little bit of a slide. It's coming down to those two teams. And I think, as I state, the winner, they're going to be the number one overall seed. And if you're Michigan, you're on the verge of being a great team, getting that victory over Duke. After that, I don't see. I mean, they would have to go to Illinois. They still have. They got to go to Carver Hawkeye as well, which I think could be a little bit of a trap game, a little bit of a relaxed game. Because also for Michigan gets up for big games. Like, I expect them to get up for this Duke game. The games that, if I'm a Wolverine fan, would bother me is when they play lesser teams and they dig a hole for themselves and have to come charging back. That tells me you're bored. That tells me you're not quite focused. Once they get over that little bugaboo, man, that team is going to be unstoppable. So that's what happened in the Big Ten on Tuesday night. I said it was going into Mackey. Yaxel backed up his talk. Mick Cronin tossed out his own player. Shorthanded Buckeye team knocks off Wisconsin, and Iowa just hands Nebraska their fourth loss out of this last 6 games. So there's more games coming up later on in the weekend. But as of right now, that's just a recap of what happened. Thanks for watching. I'll have a breakdown after this weekend's game. As I said, Michigan State and Ohio State at the Breslin Center is going to be another game on Sunday that, if you're a Big Ten fan, you'll be watching, because a lot will be on the line for that game as well. Not as big as the Michigan-Duke game, but it will be some on the line for that as well. And as a matter of fact, let me make sure. Other big games coming up. Oh, yeah, you got Purdue on Friday night Fox game. So the weekend starts off with Purdue having to bounce back from losing to Michigan. But you get to play your arch rivals, Indiana, at home. If you're Purdue, can't lose 2 in a row. And Indiana wants to make sure you lose 2 in a row. So, yeah, that's it right there. And Iowa and Wisconsin will take on each other also on Sunday as well. So I have more about this weekend stuff a little bit later on. But for now, thanks for watching. Keep liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching the 5 Star Zone. I'm your host, Rico Beard.